Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another review from Fanboys Forever. Today I'm going to attempt to catch up a little bit on some of my neglected Masters of the Universe figures that I've not had a chance to review. And instead of just Tongue Lashor that we're going to review today, there's going to be two other snake men. We have a snake woman, Teela, and we have a snake trooper. So this will be a 3-in-1 review, and we'll talk about all three of these dastardly new recruits to the snake men. Of course, if this kind of thing interests you, then please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, because it really does help us out, and let's begin. The first figure, of course, that we'll be looking at is Tongue Lasher. He's definitely one that I've really been interested in. Now, I actually do have a personal stake in this particular figure, and it's all because when I was a kid, I didn't really have many Masters of the Universe figures because, well, you know, I was a kid more of the early 90s than I was of the mid 80s. So it was kind of rare for me to see Masters figures, and I didn't get into it really deeply until later. But what I did have was a Battle Armor He-Man from my older sister, and I did find an original Tongue Lashor, and he was found at a flea market. And so he was always a figure I really loved, and I was always really drawn to. And so it's great to see them do a new one. Let's see if it lives up to my memories of the original. Of course, it wouldn't be a Masters review without complimenting the excellent artwork on the back, which is going to be collected in a brand new book that they have for pre-order right now. And as you can see, you actually have the tongue as a separate thing that plugs into his mouth, and there he is with his crossbow and staff. And here he is, Tongue Lashor, right out of the box with all of his accessories. Keep in mind he does come with a mini-comic, Assassin's Aim, as does this entire wave of figures. Of course, the figures are spotlighted, and it's a good comic. There's not a whole lot to write home about. It's not anything particularly revelatory, but it does have this, Hypno calling Skeletor a heathen, so that's something, right? So just looking at the sculpt here on Tongue Lasher, he's very impressive for a few different reasons. Number one, he instantly recalls the original Tongue Lasher, and they've definitely not messed with what I consider to be perfection. I personally believe Tongue Lasher is the best designed of all of the Snake Men. And that may be an arguable point, of course. And for me, it may have a lot to do with my own personal connections to that character from being a kid, growing up with that figure. But I really do think that the combination of orange and purple with the kind of bluish, greenish tongue, I think that that makes for a very visually appealing set of colors. It makes him stand out from the rest of the Snake Men. And unlike Ratlor, who Mattel and the Four Horsemen would wisely, many years later in the 2000X series, add the big vest and everything, because I think even they realized he looked kind of plain. He didn't need any of that. His design was practically perfect the way it was, just needed bulked up for that show a little bit. So I really do think the design is incredibly successful, and I do think that the sculptors at Mattel have done a phenomenal job of recreating the original. Now, you notice what just happened. His staff just came out of his hand. That's because he has, you know, the funny little, well, you know, it's the same hands Frogmonger has with a little ball tip on the ends of his cartoony fingers. That does create some problems when it comes to holding the accessories, because the hands are too open to hold the thin posts that are meant to, you know, be held by any of the other standard hands. And with the other Snake Men, except for the claws on CamoCon, which still had little impressions on the ends of them to hold something this thin, these hands have a markedly harder time. They're just too open to hold this stuff properly. So that's the biggest functionality challenge that I've found so far with this guy. You can place them in balance. You see how I've taken his dragonfly crossbow and just balanced it in there, and you have some options and it'll stay pretty well. But just be aware that that's kind of an issue. Now you can get creative and take one of the bulbous fingertips and put through this slot, and it kind of gives you something to hang the staff on. And it's not perfect, but you can work with that, and you can get something like that. So it's not ideal. It's certainly not a great way to do it, but it is what it is. Just so you know, you do have to attach the tongue on your own. It comes out of the figure like this. So if you don't want him to have the tongue out all the time, he can just be in kind of neutral mode pretty much. However, you do have a couple of options. I did have it going down earlier, but you could just put it in like this and have it going up. So that simulates a little bit of what they did with the original action feature of the original toy. There was kind of this knob back here, and you would roll it with your thumb, and it would cause the tongue to flicker. And so I hate that that was lost, because I think that would have been a cool action feature to have retained, because I always enjoyed playing with that as a kid. But it's also nice to have more of a display appropriate version. And of course, usually Origins takes the stance of saying, well, we'll excise this action feature and just go for the visual of it. And I'm okay with that. I really think that the paint turned out really well on this guy. It's a particularly good sample. And much like most mass market toy lines, you're never 100% sure what you're going to get with Origins. Sometimes it turns out well, sometimes it doesn't. This one turned out really well. I particularly like that on the eyes, it appears that they went with a really muted kind of yellow, and it ends up almost making it look like transparent lenses. So it looks a lot better than had they had gone with like a cartoony yellow, and it just looks nicer. The actual camo patterns on the arms and the legs are really nice. And the striking green snake men symbol right there in the middle of the chest is just fantastic looking. So I have to say, he really is just a vision. His articulation is exactly what you would expect, and of course, his pieces are as modular as you would think that they would be. But Tongue Lasher is definitely one of, he belongs in the top echelon of a lot of my Origins collection, because I just have such a strong connection to the original. And to me, it is still genuinely so aesthetically pleasing. And this is one of those figures that not only does it capture the look of the original, I do think that because the colors are more vivid and some of the proportions are a little more lined out, I just think it looks better than the original. I think overall there's more of a, I don't know, it has more of its own identity, and it's a little more cartoon leaning. So I really like this version, and I think they've done just a phenomenal job with this. Oh, and the Snake Men's ranks keep growing. So here's a figure that I never really thought we would see in Origins. I was pretty surprised when they announced this. This is basically the idea from the 2000X series that Teela would get turned into a Snake Man or a Snake Woman. In this case, they've definitely done some 2000X leaning things, and we'll talk about all of that when we get there. And so it's good that they went in this direction, because they're definitely taking advantage of one of the only ways that you can have a female snake person in the team. There's some other ways, and hopefully we'll see those ways. But yeah, I think this is really cool looking. We'll of course look at the art on the back. I'm really glad that on the back they didn't go for like He-Man beating her to death with a smile on his face or something. He's not even fighting her. He's just shocked and like, whoa. I think he's trying to decide that if he likes the new look or not. He's like, I could get into that. Going on down, it's just like, hey, put that sword in her hands, kids. Look at that. You can do that. All right, let's get her out of the package. And here she is, Snake Teela. Now, I can't be the only one, I'm sure, that was uncomfortable always with the idea of mainline Masters characters being turned into snake people. I don't know why necessarily, but it always kind of just felt a little wrong to me. And in the 2000X show, I thought that maybe that wasn't the best idea. And especially when I've heard Scott Knightlick and some others talk about how that for the third season, the idea was that Man-at-Arms would just permanently be a Snake Man, or he would like be changed into that. And I never really cared for that very much. And I'm not really sure what Duncan did to someone at Mattel Corporate or Mike Young Productions to deserve such a fate. And I thought, well, gee. And then it also irked me that they preserved that bit of storytelling for the Masters of the Universe Classics line. So that was one of the things I didn't like. And so I was fairly confident that when they announced this wave and I saw Snake Person Teela here, that this would probably be the figure that I would be the least excited about. And sure enough, it was. It was the figure that I was the least passionate about. Didn't really care too much about it. And I was like, I'll get it eventually. And you may have felt the same way, but I gotta say, upon getting her out of the packaging, against all odds, this is an absolutely rocking figure. I mean, this figure is just fantastic. I think when I first saw the execution on how exactly they were going to accomplish things with this, I thought, okay, well, it's just, it's a repaint, whatever. And I thought, okay, they're leaning too much on paint versus just sculpting some of this in, and that may be true. Maybe they should have went for an actual snake person head sculpt. But I have to say that this is just such cool decal work that they've done here with the scales on the top and the color under the eyes, and even the little slits, like the snake slits on the eyes, and even little teeth that's been painted onto these lips. And I love the trick about doing the top lip black and the bottom lip red. It gives it a real pop art kind of thing, and it makes the lips pop, and it's sort of something I want to see them do again on a regular Teela. Maybe just a dark red on the top and a lighter red at the bottom. Then on the neck, you have those ridges, built in there. And then you have some on the sides here, which actually look really nice, all little scale groupings. And then you have kind of an inner snake part on the inner thigh of the legs. And you can see that detail from the back as well. So I ended up really being charmed by all of this decal work, by all of this paint work, and how precise it was. I actually thought it would be a sloppy mess. It definitely wasn't. Everything really, through production, went well, and I have no idea how they were able to line up all of this intricate paint work, because I see it, I see paint work get messed up constantly with Origins on these simplest things. I mean, King Hiss's eyes that I had to repaint myself. I mean, it doesn't matter. It seems like it's just a constant thing. Not so here. And I don't know what the difference is, but whatever it was, Mattel, whatever you did production-wise, you may want to keep doing it, because just from a production standpoint, I think the figure stands out. The other thing that really stands out that I didn't realize at first was that there's a whole new chest sculpt. Everything about the chest is new, because it's been made to look like the 2000X Teela that actually had shoulder pads, slightly different design on the chest. And I think it's fantastic that they actually, went the extra mile. And so even though we didn't get a new head sculpt, I think that the thinking was very smart here. The reasoning was very intelligent, because it was like, okay, well, let's instead spend the money on a torso, and then we can re-release this as a 2000X Teela down the line. But not only did they do that, but we actually got brand new 2000X style boots that have the unique design from that show. And I think that's great. Now, keep in mind, these don't have paint or anything, but gee, look at how much paint we already have on the figure. And for this to be, a mass release, I think that was a fine sacrifice to make. And really, things came together unexpectedly well. I sincerely didn't think I would care very much at all about this, and it turns out it's really good. I also like that, yes, you do get Teela's same old accessories with her sword and her staff, but what's cool, and I think the thing that makes Teela make a little more sense than some of the other snake people, is that she already has serpentine powers, and that there's a serpentine connection with the green goddess, and that's the same sculpts and everything. And depending on what lore you follow, maybe there's a connection there to Teela. I think that part comes together, because she already has her own snake staff and a serpentine blade. I think the motif is just working right there. I also think that their version of like the bronzy kind of gold, I think that worked pretty well. Comparison. This is the one that they released with Zor and the set, and I thought this is probably as close as we would get to a 2000X release, but nope. You can see that it uses the old torso up here and the old boots down here, and in comparison, we have the new one over here that has the updated 2000X parts. Of course, it would be useless to try to swap this torso onto this because of all the green, on the neck and all of that. There'd be no fixing it. But this is, a look, since this uses the 2000X styled head sculpt with a ponytail. This is kind of a look, when you combine these things together a little, about what it might look like when we do eventually get that figure, and assuredly we will. But yeah, I think this works well. Yeah, color me surprised about this one. Definitely seek it out. And our last Snake Man of the day, we have the Snake Trooper. It is the slithering cyborg of the Snake Men. I think that this is a fascinating idea. This is taken from an abandoned, I think it was 87 or 88 line of products, to where they would have been, reuses of parts and repaints of things, just so that they could have another standard line out. And it was indeed going to be a combination of that Horde Trooper body sculpt and the Ratlore head sculpt, so that you could make kind of a new army builder figure. You can see that he does the exact same thing in terms of action feature. And in a surprise to no one, we have awesome artwork up here. It says, augmented with Horde science, the Snake Troopers changed from simple minions to self-repairing cyborgs. I like that. And we even have Strobo right here. So I do expect that we'll be seeing Strobo pretty quick. So, of course, both he and Teela come with this cool little mini comic, and I actually really like this one. It's definitely very interesting what they do here, so if you want to look this one up, do it. There's one character that I'm really wondering about their identity, so they never really clarify who it is. Now, this has always been a concept that I think the fandom has really liked, the combination of kind of two grunts here. Although it's always funny that the Snake Men never just had a snake soldier kind of grunt figure. And of course, with Origins, they're looking to correct that in some ways, because we do have the new Snake Armor He-Man set coming out where you do get some of those grunts. So I think that's a really good decision. The only previous version of this guy was done for Masters of the Universe Classics in one of those box sets that's now impossible to get. And I never did get it, so it's a real shame. I always did want that. Let's take a close look at this guy. It's obvious that the armor here is the exact same thing that we've seen on the Horde Troopers before. I think that they were very successful in production of getting the colors right and very vivid on this thing. I especially like the accents of gold right there, those little flourishes right there on the arms and the belt buckle, because they really give it a unique vibe, I think. I also like that you do get the standard Horde Trooper weapon, which is like the Horde Bat or Lizard or Gargoyle or something right there. And I think it looks really cool. I've always liked the sculpting on this piece. Of course, the hands are sculpted to fit those items pretty well, so you won't have any trouble with that. You also get a Snake Man shield, and I really like the shield. It's the same one that King Hiss includes, but I think it works as an army builder type of piece as well. I like the boots down here because they went to the trouble of painting in the Horde logos. You can see Horde Prime or Hordak or whoever it's supposed to be down there on the boots. And from the back, there really isn't any paint detail. However, the action feature works exactly like what you've seen in the past, and I'll go ahead and remove his accessories here. So basically you just push this in and then it just flops open. And so underneath you can see that he has all the cyborg parts and all of that. So I think that this is like a horrifying Horde experiment where they just took a Snake Man's head and attached it to a robot body just to see if he could do it. Now the funny part is the only way to get the head to like look down at the normal level is to have the armor open like this. You can see this is about as low as the Ratlore head ever goes. However, once you try to push this together, it'll only go together part of the way like this, and then you're missing part of the mouth down here. So it won't close. You have to angle it up all the way like you saw, and that's the only way that that gap closes. And then this is as low as you can go. So he's constantly looking up, and that's a problem. I think that this would have been a very wise time to have put in a little neck extender piece in there, just to go between, to where you could have had this be a little higher, and just to simulate what that would be like, just unpegging it, it would have been more like this, which I think would have been far better, the better visual option. There's another funny option I would like to try, and that would be to take the extended neck piece out here of Ratlore and put it on the Snake Trooper and see if that works. Before we try the piece itself, I do want to show you that yes, you can just put Ratlore's head in there, so if you want a red variety, you could totally do that. And here we are, it works perfectly. I actually think this is a pretty cool look. Let's imagine this fella right here is the same breed of snake as Ratlore from that same snake family. So he may have this ability as well. This is the only time where I've been glad that the Ratlore neck was not painted on the back, the red that it ought to be, because then you can just use it generally for any of these guys too. So I think this actually looks really cool and a little more intimidating. It would have been great if they had just included this neck piece. It would have been great. And if you woke up this morning and you chose violence, you can totally do this. This is also a thing. You can also get some funny combinations if you really want to. And you can make the new Snake Man character Bubba. Hordak turned me into half a robot, he did. My legs can barely work. I gotta walk like a tin soldier, I do. And you can even get a sexy Snake Man. That's right. This is what Hordak commissioned for his charity calendar. The charity was him. And here's an absolutely great option. All you got to do is take the head from the Horde Trooper that came in that exclusive PowerCon pack from about 1.5 years ago, and you can just pop it on this guy, and you can just have a regular old Horde Trooper in those colors. Honestly, this is a lot better looking black armor, black and red armor for the Horde Trooper than that Con set had. I think the reds match a lot better right there on that particular logo. I also like the presence of the gold, and it's a lot better than the kind of sloppy yellow that's down there on that belt buckle. Also really like that he's wearing the Horde boots with the red logos, because I think it ties the look together a little bit better. But I also understand if you like the robot feet. Besides, you're just a simple swap away with taking these feet off to put it on this guy, and you can give him the robot feet, so it's not a big deal. All right, so I think in the end that this one really is a good one, and if I ever find a pretty good deal on them, I think I'll try to army build at least 3 or 4 of these guys, and I think they're fantastic. The cool thing is that you can either say, oh, it's Hordax, you know, and he's built this out of Snake Man parts, and they're like zombies that he has working for him, and that works. Or you can say that, you know, they're from King Hiss and that he's stolen Hordax technology to upgrade his Snake Men warriors. So you have all sorts of cool options with it, and it's great to have options when it comes to your factions like that. So I have to say, I think 2023 has been a really fun time to be into Masters, and especially if you're like me and the Snake Men are your favorite faction, and they've always been mine when it comes to the 3 major villain factions in Masters. When it comes to anything that's sword and sorcery or barbarian based, you really can't get much better than having your heroes fight serpentine types of villains. And I think the Snake Men definitely fit the bill on this. They're so cool that sometimes Skeletor even cosplays as a Snake Man, you know, because he's compensating and has an inferiority complex and is a narcissist and has imposter syndrome and clinically depressed and constipated. These are just really cool on their own, and I'm finally, now that we're getting a lot of them, even counting things like CamoCon back there, you know, which was an exclusive, now that we're starting to get a lot of these guys together, it's becoming more fun to put the Snake Men together than any other team or faction in all of Origins. I think that it's just really cool to see them all together like this. And it's really making me anticipate getting my snake face in and finding Squeeze later on. And of course, getting that kind of army builder pack that we're going to have with the repaint of Snake Armor He-Man. And if recent rumors are to be believed about upcoming waves, things like Ninja Turtles, well, I may make another video about that one. But it does seem like maybe we're setting the lineup to be a really long-term thing indeed. So it's great to see all the haters and the doubters proven wrong, and it's awesome to see the line just continue and for us to keep getting these incredible pieces. Of course, before you go, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss all those upcoming He-Man videos that I have. Of course, I have a little bit of catching up to do, and I have a really fun video coming up as well. Also, be sure to like the video because it really does help our channel grow, and we really appreciate it. With all that out of the way, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out. And if you don't know what I mean yet, just let me take you.
All that turned me into half a robot, he did. My legs can barely work. I gotta walk like a tin soldier, I do.